Good Sunday afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Around the Horn with Ben McKee. I'm Brent Hubbs, Volquest.com. And the Tennessee baseball team does what nobody thought they were going to do over the course of the last 2 weeks. They sweep on the road at Ole Miss. They sweep on the road in Nashville against Vanderbilt. And Ben, this one on Sunday, Saturday was a gem. This one's in a whole different stratosphere with Drew Beam as Tennessee wins 5-0 over the Commodores.
Drew Beam, terrific yet again. I didn't think he could top last weekend's outing at Ole Miss, kind of like we talked about with Chase Dollander last night, but he did it. A complete game shutout, 110 pitches, I believe 4 strikeouts on the day. Didn't allow a runner to reach scoring position. Just absolutely incredible. Didn't walk anybody. His strike ratio within those 110 pitches were incredible, and he just pitched an absolute gem. Let his defense go to work with him. Courtland Lawson was terrific at shortstop, and Vandy just did not look like the typical Vanderbilt at the plate.
Interesting. I mean, we were talking a lot about the pitching here, and obviously the pitching was great all weekend. Tennessee was really good behind the pitching this weekend, particularly on that left side of the diamond. When you talk about shortstop, you talk about what Trey Lipscomb did at third base side. I mean, Tennessee's defense behind that starting pitcher made it really comfortable for them just to throw strikes and let guys hit it to them because they were making every play.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the perfect combination. If you throw strikes and you have a great defense, you're going to win a whole lot of baseball games, regardless of if you have an elite offense or not. Thankfully for Tennessee, they do have an elite offense, but pitching and defense kind of led the way this weekend, especially on Sunday and Saturday. Trey Lipscomb did have an error earlier this weekend. But aside from that, it was very clean, especially compared to last weekend. There were conversations about Jarrell Ortega and his defense at second. He had a really good game defensively on Saturday night. And then today, Courtland Lawson, who also had a couple of weird defensive mistakes in Oxford last weekend, he was terrific today. I don't know what he finished with, but through 4 innings, I think it was, through the first 12 outs, he had 5 of them. And he was just getting ground ball after ground ball after ground ball, and he was terrific all day long. So you're going to win a whole lot of games when the defense plays like it did today, this weekend, and the pitching does what it did.
What's the big overarching takeaway from this weekend? Obviously, you get to sweep, and that's huge. But when you look at this team, and you knew they were good coming in, what's the takeaway after back-to-back weekends like this?
That they can win the national championship, and it just kind of confirms my thought last weekend that they're the front runner at this point. I know there's a long ways to go, and I don't think they're peaking too early, but who knows? Maybe we look up in a couple of months and say, yeah, Tennessee peaked real early. Tony Vitello joked today that for anybody saying that, to just watch how they tried to bunt earlier today on Sunday, and you realize that there are plenty of things that they can continue to work on. So it was more about just confirming my thoughts last weekend, Brent. I thought Vanderbilt was going to be a much tougher test, and in some ways they were. You didn't really get the blowout games this weekend. Vanderbilt's pitching was much better than Ole Miss's pitching, and it took some big hits, especially on Sunday, for Tennessee to really feel comfortable. Drew Gilbert needed a 2-run double in the 9th inning to and make it more comfortable going into the bottom of the 9th. So again, for me, it's just kind of reaffirming what I felt last weekend, that, hey, Tennessee's by far the best team in the country. There's a long ways to go, but they're the front runner to win the national championship at this point. And it would be disappointing not to get to Omaha and win a couple of games at this point. Even if they don't win the Natty, not winning games in Omaha at this point would be disappointing. So I don't really think that I took something away. It's just more just affirming what I thought last weekend.
How impressed are you with the maturity that they have had this week? Because you get the sweep over Ole Miss, and you're number one unanimous. Everybody's talking about you. Western Carolina has been a team that's been a problem for Tennessee through the years in terms of just making the game close. They hammer Western Carolina. There's all the hype coming into this one. Tennessee was the more poised, more mature team, even though they're playing with a lot of freshmen. How impressed are you with this team's maturity, Ben?
Very impressed. As I try to get a spider web out of here, very impressed. We talked a little bit about it last night, just that, number 1 ranking in the country, just came off an emotional weekend in Oxford. Now you have to turn around and, after playing a Wednesday game instead of a Tuesday game, take a bus ride over to Nashville to play your biggest rival within the conference when it comes to baseball. There was a lot that was placed on the shoulders of Tennessee baseball this week. The number 1 ranking unanimously, first time ever. just a lot of fanfare, a lot of press throughout the country, locally, nationally. And you've got to come over and play a team that was irritated from dropping 2 of 3 at South Carolina last weekend. And Friday and Saturday, Tennessee, both games, it seemed like Tennessee was the more composed team, the more mature team. Vanderbilt made some uncharacteristic mistakes that you don't typically see a Tim Corbin team make. And Tennessee was not that team. And it could have been really easy for them to be. So the fact that Chase Burns is a true freshman on Friday, Chase Dolander's a sophomore who hasn't really pitched in this league before. He did what he did on Saturday. Drew Beam on Sunday. You had some new guys in new roles. Will Mabry on Friday night. Kirby Connell come in and get Enrique Bradfield Jr., make some big plays in key moments. Cortland Lawson, Jarrell Ortega, their defense was much better this weekend, and they're in new roles. You had Christian Moore, true freshman, step up and make some really big plays and tally some really big hits. So I've been very impressed by the maturity. But it makes sense when you sit here and you talk to Chase Burns after the game and Chase Dolander and Drew Beam. It makes total sense just listening to them speak why they are so mature as a true freshman. And that's something that Tony Vitello and his staff look for in the recruiting trail as well. And it's leading to on-field play. And also, I do think Tennessee was sparked. Not that it needed to be sparked, but I do think the bat incident on Friday helped juice them up. And they carried that throughout the weekend. They really wanted to take Vanderbilt, and they did.
So what does Tony Vitello do to keep this team where they're at? What does this team need to work on? Because here's the questions that are going to be out there for Tony Vitello and you and everybody else who covers this team. What are you going to do with Tidwell, right? What are you going to do when all the arms come back? How do you manage all of this? What does Tony Vitello do to make sure this team keeps an edge, or is that not even really a concern with this group?
I'm not concerned about it, but of course, Tony, being the head coach, will continue to try to make sure that they don't become complacent. And Drew Gilbert said following the game that as long as Tony Vitello is the head coach of Tennessee, there will be no complacency. He just does not allow his guys to be complacent. We always hear the coach speak in every sport about the next game is the most important game, and Tony Vitello drills that into these guys' head, and that will continue to be the message. They realized that last year they got to Omaha, and that was a fun story and whatnot. This year they want to win games in Omaha, and in order for them to do so, they have to get better. And there's no glaring weakness. I mean, you really have to nitpick, but there are things that can be cleaned up. The defense needs to continue to get better. Just fundamental baseball, such as the bunting, as I mentioned earlier, that's got to become better. There's some roles that still need to be hashed out in the bullpen, and Blake Tidwell and Ben Joyce didn't even pitch this weekend, and few guys that should be pitching did not pitch because the starters were so dominant. It's an embarrassment of riches for Tennessee, and I do think they'll try to build Tidwell up to get back in the rotation. But in the meantime, they're going to continue to throw him out of the bullpen and continue to try to just let that play out, I guess you could say. So there's still plenty to work on. Base running didn't really catch up to them this weekend, but it has in some games this season. That's an area that they can continue to improve. And then they've got to get healthy. Tidwell, Seth Halverson should be back in the next week or so. Jared Dickey only hit once this weekend because of a deep bone bruise. So I did agree with Tony Vitello when he responded to, has this team peaked, or how do you not prevent it from peaking at this point? Like, there's still tiny fundamental baseball issues that they can get much better at. And if they can really master those tools, then, I mean, it's going to be really hard to knock off Tennessee.
Well, I mean, it's you said it best. It's an embarrassment of riches of where they are in with their pitching rotation. What Frank Anderson has done with his group, nobody in the country can line up with what Tennessee's lining up with in starting pitching. They were unbelievable this weekend. Just an impressive show that everybody is going to be jazzed up, ready for Knoxville. We're going to let you get back on the road, get back to the house. By the way, Tim Corbin would like his shirt back. I'll go ahead and get that one out of the way because the GQ is going to have a field day with that one today. But great coverage all weekend long. Tennessee with a sweep the last 2 weekends. Ben, if somebody had told you that 3 weeks ago, would you have bought that one at all? Would you have been buying that one?
No. And for the record, this is peach, and I was worried about it passing as a Tennessee shirt. So I guess if it passes as a Vanderbilt shirt, that's not a bad thing either. I do have a purple check too, so that's got to count for something, right? Can we say Clemson, Ben, or something like that?
Something like that. I'm not sure about that. But this team is on a roll, and this team is a ton of fun, and this team has a world of opportunities in front of them moving forward.
You and I talked about it, Hubbs. I kind of diverted there with the shirt, but you and I talked about it, I believe, and said if they go 3-3 against Ole Miss and Ole Miss and Vandy, I mean, that's called a successful day. They went 6-0 against two of the better teams in the country on the road, and certainly established themselves as the most dominant team in baseball right now. I can't believe they went 6-0. I'm very surprised. And if you would have told me that a couple of weeks ago, I would have told you were crazy, Brent.
And 6-0, and really only one of the 6 games got a little bit dicey late. They were in control the last 3 innings of all 6 of these games, really in control the whole game for most all of them. Only that Sunday game in Ole Miss did you have a little bit of a scare. Other than that, this was Tennessee from beginning to end for 9 innings, 6 straight games on the road in the SEC. This team is 9-0 in SEC play, coming back to Lindsey Nelson Stadium next weekend. That's going to do it for this edition of Around the Horn. He's Ben McKee. I'm Brent Hubbs, Volquest.com.